On April 6, 1453, the people of Constantinople woke up to a historic day. The city was under siege by the Ottoman army under the command of Mehmed the Conqueror. After 53 days of siege on May 29, 1453, the Ottoman army breached the walls and captured the city. The city was plundered for 3 days following the conquest. Mehmed the Conqueror attempted to prevent his soldiers from causing damage to the symbolic structures of the city during the plunder. After the looting came to an end, Mehmed immediately ordered the repair of the damaged structures in the city. One of the first actions taken was the conversion of Hagia Sophia into a mosque. This conversion marked the beginning of a new era in the city. Once the capital of Rome and Byzantium, the city would now become the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. However, Istanbul was socially insufficient to serve as a capital. Before and after the conquest, a significant portion of the population had left the city, reducing its population to levels between 50,000 and 60,000. Mehmed the Conqueror aimed to restore Istanbul to its former glory. To achieve this, he issued a decree assuring those who had fled the city that they could safely return to their homes. Later, Turks living in Anatolia and Rumelia were brought to Istanbul, and separate neighborhoods were established for Muslims and Christians. In a short period, Istanbul took on a structure where people of different religions lived in separate neighborhoods. The people brought from various regions carried the culture of their hometowns to the neighborhoods where they settled. This extraordinary cultural diversity enriched the city's cultural fabric. The diversity was so profound that transitioning between neighborhoods felt like moving from one culture to another. Various measures were taken to preserve this cultural diversity in the city. For instance, to settle in a different neighborhood, one had to have lived in Istanbul for 5 years and find a sponsor from the local community. As a result, neighborhoods began to evolve into closed residential areas, often consisting of relatives. While people living in these neighborhoods may have ostracized individuals from different religions, the lifestyles of Muslims and Christians became remarkably similar in a short period. They ate similar foods, wore similar clothing, and engaged in similar activities. Additionally, since the residential areas in Istanbul were not shaped according to social classes as seen in Europe, there was no possibility of ghettoization in classical Istanbul. People, regardless of their financial status, lived harmoniously in the same neighborhoods. One of the urban development projects in Istanbul was the construction of the covered bazaar in 1461, commissioned by Mehmed the Conqueror. This place served as a massive shopping center where every kind of product could be found. The covered bazaar housed shops such as jewelers, silk merchants, carpet sellers, and fabric vendors, as well as facilitating the trade of food items like fruits, vegetables, grains, flour, and salt. Furthermore, tanneries, tailors, potters, and needle makers, where raw materials were supplied, were also present. The city's residents and traders from different regions could easily access a wide range of products here. In short, shortly after becoming active, the covered bazaar became the center of Istanbul's commerce. By the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire had conquered a significant portion of the eastern Mediterranean through new conquests, expanding its territories significantly in the east and west directions. This dominion established in the port cities of the Mediterranean allowed these cities to establish commercial relations with Istanbul, rapidly enriching the city. However, this rapid growth brought along some problems. There was an uncontrolled increase in population, and as a result, new settlements were established outside the walls. By the late 16th century, the number of households in Istanbul was around 80,000. This indicated an estimated population of the city ranging between 320,000 and 400,000 people. However, this situation began to change. Some developments in Western Europe began to harm Istanbul's economic superiority. Geographical discoveries that would change trade routes had started. These new developments would significantly affect both the Ottoman Empire's and Istanbul's economies. The changing trade routes led to a decline in the volume of trade in the Eastern Mediterranean. States trading in this region, including the Ottoman Empire, Venice, and Genoa, were affected by this shrinkage. Throughout the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire and Istanbul began to drift away from their former glory. Following the defeat in the Siege of Vienna in 1683 and subsequent losses on the western borders, it became evident that the city would not regain its former strength. After the defeat in the Battle of Petrovaradin against Austria in 1716, the Ottoman Empire was completely expelled from Hungary, and Belgrade fell into Austrian hands. Following this defeat, the Treaty of Passarowitz was signed between the two states in 1718, marking the beginning of a long peace process. The technological superiority of European armies in this war highlighted the clear difference between the Ottoman and Austrian armies. Therefore, the time for new initiatives had come. Sultan Ahmed III ordered envoys to be sent to European countries to study developments in the West. These envoys were tasked with conducting research on the culture, industry, art, and military situation of Europe, presenting reports to the palace. After these reports, new steps would be taken, and the first printing press in Istanbul would be established in 1727. Various factories, such as a tile and fabric factory, followed these developments. However, shortly afterward, this interest in the progress of the West shifted more towards the ostentation and splendor of European court life rather than technological advancements. During this period, mansions and palaces were built one after another along the shores of the Bosphorus and the Golden Horn. The wealthy class constructed mansions in the Western style and cultivated tulips in their gardens. The economic downturn following the loss in the war resulted in a significant part of the population suffering from hunger and poverty. However, the comfortable lives of the rich class and state officials remained uninterrupted, and their luxury indulgences even increased. This situation began to cause unrest among the people, and every luxurious expenditure aimed at westernization in the state hierarchy further intensified this unrest. With the ascension of Mahmud I, this period, later known as the Tulip Era, came to an end. Westernization activities were put on hold for a long time after the rebellion. However, when the reign of Sultan Abdülmecid began, the process of westernization gained momentum again. On November 3, 1839, the Imperial Edict of Reform, Tanzimat, was announced in the Gulhane Garden of the Topkapi Palace by the Sultan's decree. This edict included provisions such as equality before the courts and the fair collection of taxes. During this period in Istanbul, an entertainment culture in the Western style began to take shape, especially in Beyoğlu, with the opening of many taverns. Beyoğlu, with its taverns, coffee houses, tobacco shops, and theaters, started to become an entertainment center. This new lifestyle was particularly accepted among the wealthy segments of society but had little resonance among the rest of the population. The societal structure in Europe had changed due to intellectual movements like the Renaissance and Reform movements, shaping their lifestyles accordingly. However, in the Ottoman Empire, there was no foundation for the lifestyle arising from these intellectual movements. Therefore, a significant part of the population was quite resistant to this new way of life. During this period, extravagance prevailed in state administration under the guise of westernization. Consumption continued to increase both in the palace and among the common people, despite no new steps being taken in production. This rapid increase in consumption was causing the country's external debt to grow rapidly. Despite the country's economy being in a difficult situation, Sultan Abdülmecid believed that a new palace in the Western style should be built instead of the Topkapi Palace. Eventually, under the command of Sultan Abdülmecid, the Armenian architect family, the Bulyans, constructed the Dolmabahce Palace between 1843 and 1855. The cost of the palace exceeded 5 million gold coins, further straining the country's economy. As a result of the economic crisis caused by the palace, payments to state officials' salaries became impossible. Payments, initially delayed by 2 weeks, eventually turned into payments made every 3 to 4 months. When Sultan Abdülmecid passed away in 1861, he had only resided in the newly built palace for 5 years. However, when Abdülhamid II ascended the throne in 1876, he chose to reside in the Yıldız Palace instead of the Dolmabahce Palace. Under his rule, Dolmabahce Palace fell into neglect and began to decay. Shortly after Sultan Abdülhamid II ascended the throne, the Turkish-Russian War, which began on April 27, 1877, adversely affected Istanbul due to its proximity to the palace. Wounded and sick soldiers coming from the front lines, along with Rumelian immigrants fleeing the devastation of the war, created a significant population density in Istanbul. These immigrants struggled to live in misery in mosques, madrasas, and wooden barracks built for them. As these difficulties reached Yeşilköy, the Treaty of San Stefano was signed on March 3, 1878, bringing an end to the war. During these years, the people of Istanbul had become accustomed to living between peace and war. The challenging times resumed in Istanbul when Sultan Abdülhamid was dethroned and sent into exile after the events of the 31st of March in 1909. 3 years later, with the start of the Balkan Wars on October 18, 1912, the people of Istanbul once again witnessed the destruction brought by the war. The following year, in 1913, the raid on Babai Ali occurred. Grand Vizier Kemal Pasha resigned under duress, and his replacement, Mehmed Sevket Pasha, fell victim to an assassination on June 11, 1913. Consecutive raids and assassinations caused panic and chaos among the people. On top of this gloomy atmosphere, the outbreak of World War I and the Ottoman Empire's involvement on the side of Germany and Austria exacerbated the situation. World War I led to a severe famine in Istanbul and throughout the country. The situation worsened for a significant part of the population due to hoarding and black market activities. Many middle-class shopkeepers, who were once modest before the wars, became wealthy by engaging in black market activities during the war and spent their earnings lavishly in Beyoğlu's taverns and restaurants. During this period, the wealth gap between the rich and poor reached extreme levels. In the First World War, the Ottoman Empire suffered defeats on many fronts, and a large part of the country was occupied. On the night of March 15, 1920, the Allied forces landed numerous soldiers in Istanbul, taking control of the city's crucial points. By the morning of March 16th, the city was completely occupied. The Ottoman era had come to an end in Istanbul. The hardship caused by the war, coupled with the pressures from enemy soldiers, plunged the people of Istanbul into a severe crisis. There seemed to be little hope for the end of these difficult days. Yet, everything had not come to an end. At that time, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk and his comrades, engaged in the struggle for independence in Anatolia, would defeat the enemy armies within a few years, and Istanbul would once again come under Turkish control.